Hello there guys, it's Kid Bombing again. I'm so glad to see you join me on another video for Read Aloud. So, as you all know, smegheads, I'm going to continue reading Red Dwarf backwards. Was written by co-creator Rob Grant. Some of you might recognise this already, since I've previously read first two parts, like Very Good Boy and Universe. So, you know, it was such a smegging brilliant. It is in a section with Sven, Cat and Kryten and Wimmer trying to find Lister in Universe, who's been stranded. So, she'll continue to read more this British science fiction comedy novel version. Okay, what was I? It was on page 34. We're still halfway through in chapter 4 of Red Dwarf backwards in Universe. So, shall we begin? A solitary moon was pleasing aesthetically, nicely understated, not so showy. He jogged round a bent stop to take his bearings. This was roughly the place designated for rendezvous. He looked around and spotted the dirt road that led down to the valley. Fresh, deep tyre marks were cut into the road beside a shallow ditch, which was thickly strewn with loose foliage. With a smart Kryten registered the police siren, poo-pooing towards him. He dived into the ditch and tucked the ferns and branches around him, just as the police car leaped over the brow and reversed past him, sucking with it thick plumes of dust. Kryten lay there until the siren faded and the engine sounds had died away. Then he lay there a little longer. Then he began to wonder what in heaven's name he was laying there for. The police car was out of sight, and since he hadn't seen anyone on his jog up on the footpath, he followed out of the ditch and crept to the brow of the mountain. The old pickup car was weighing up the valley trail towards him. He connected up the foliage he had used for cover and began to reattach it to nearby bushes and trees. It seemed a decent thing to do. In the reverse ecology of this planet, the function of planet life was to suck in the oxygen that humans exhaled and process it into carbon dioxide, which humans require to breathe. As just it was affixing a last leaf, the pickup truck tumbled over the crest of a track and screeched to the stop, neatly in the pre-cut tire tracks. The door flung itself open, and Kryten caught the handle. "Everything okay, sir?" "Get in, Kryten, let's go." Kryten climbed into the passenger seat and tucked the door closed. Lister raised his foot from a brake and they lurched off backwards. When they hit top speed, Lister pumped down on the accelerator and they raced steadily off along the track up towards the peak. Kryten looked up at the driver's mirror and caught a glimpse of a cat who was sitting regularly in the rear seat, his eyes wide and unblinking, as if someone had slapped two fried eggs either side of his nose. "What's wrong with the cat?" Lister shrugged. He's been like that since the climb. Hasn't said a word. Kryten twisted round in his seat. Are you feeling all right, sir? The cat simply kept staring straight on. Kryten noticed his lips were moving minutely. He leaned over as close as possible and made out the cat's mumbled mama. Got it? Said he was saying over and over. Got it? Said it. Oot oot. When Kryten turned back, Lister was studying the driving mirror. There he goes, he said. Kryten twisted round again. The trail had widened and straightened, and in the distance, a flashing blue light above a small ball of dust was travelling away from them. It won't be long now, Lister smiled. After a few seconds, the dust ball vanished and black and white killed its lights and siren reversed swiftly off the track through the gate which had led to a small farmstead where it seemed to park. It took a pickup a couple of minutes to reach the gate. As they zoomed up, Kryten saw the policeman standing by his vehicle with a barefoot man in dungarees. They were both staring at the pickup agape. Kryten felt Lister's hand on his head, thrusting him below the windscreen. Stay out of sight, Lister hissed. After a few seconds, Lister raised his hand and Kryten straightened up in a seat. The car was cleared. That's it then, sir, he beamed. A policeman is no longer in pursuit. Rimmer leaned back and closed his eyes. He might as he well have been urging a crippled, blind, deaf, mute to be dancing to a lullaby. He was beginning to wish they hadn't turned him back on. Kryten had rigged his portable power bank to the old pickup domino, and they had revived him in order to help his batteries wind down, which seemed to Rimmer as insane as everything else in his lunatic world. Still, they were heading towards Starburg. This nightmare was almost over soon enough. They had been in a universe where time flowed smoothly in the proper direction and things made sense. A universe where Santa Claus was a good person, not some evil old bastard who sneaked down chimneys once a year to steal all the kids' favourite toys. Rimmer was as close as it was possible to get to the state of relaxation under circumstances when Lister inexplicably jammed his foot on the brake and wrenched the steering wheel left. The cab tilted so only the half truck was actually on the road. As they sped round a bend, suddenly they were reversing past an almost stationary tractor which blew its horns angrily as they zipped by at a cartoon angle of 45 degrees. Lister slewed the car back to the horizontal position and the wheels kissed the dust of the mountain track. Hang on! Shouted Lister. Lister shouted. He looked either at Kryten and Rimmer, both of their faces frozen in grins of terror. Sorry, should have warned you before words, he struggled. Habit? Rimmer pressed his nails out of his knees and uttered ruthless words, which under normal circumstances the human lyrics could not possibly be produced. He looked out of the window. Hedgerows and bushes spat past dizzyingly, despite their near-death experience, and the fact that the road was getting colder and rougher. Lister hadn't dropped his speed run alter. Just how much further we began, and then spotted something that took his mind off their velocity. On the seat beside him was a cluster of tiny shards of glass he hadn't noticed before. There was another spatting of them by that handbrake. Where all that this glass came from, and what was that funny little hole in the dashboard you were saying? Rimmer's eyes flicked up to the driver's mirror. There seemed to be a similar sort of funny-looking hole in the rear window. Rimmer! Rimmer turned to examine the hole, which was surrounded by the network of thin cracks. He turned back to Lister. Where did you get this car? Lister shrugged. Dunno. What do you mean you don't know? This is your car, isn't it? Lister shrugged. Maybe I have never seen it before. Are you telling me you're about to steal this vehicle? Not necessarily. Maybe I'm going to buy it. Rimmer's eyebrows pushed his hairline back a good 2 inches. At the highest, most obscure peak of an obscure mountain range, presumably from one of the mainly discount second-hand car showrooms that flourished there. Lister shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Who knows? Maybe we buy it from a farmer or something. Lister, there's only one kind of people live in the most obscure peaks of obscure mountains. Strange people. People who don't like other people, not polite. Besuited second-hand car salespeople. Hermit type. Inbred people with crisscross front teeth and penchant for stew well stocked with human flesh. People who, when other people take something away from them, are not averse to shooting at those other people with bullets. Kryten twisted towards Lister. Bullets? Bullets? Lister sighed. Okay. Are we going to get shot at? He nodded. The bullet hole in a dash, but he's going to miss. Can everyone please relax? But Wimmer couldn't relax. He became less relaxed with every stone that spat itself under the wheels of the stolen car as they recklessly wound their way up the narrowing road towards the inevitable gun battle. Wimmer thought he was his most unrelaxed when Lister suddenly thrust his hand out of the driver's window and caught a handful of shattered glass, which he distributed around his lap, but he was wrong. His unrelaxation didn't even peak when Lister screamed, "Heads down!" and ducked towards the steering wheel. Kryten and Wimmer dipped their heads as low as they could. The cat did not move. Wimmer hissed at him to get down, but he just remained upright and staring forward, oblivious. Wimmer glanced up at the driver's mirror just in time to see the bearded, genetically challenged, diagonally dented hillbilly hermit of his nightmare level, a smoking rifle at them. With a strange sucking sound, a bullet took itself out of her dashboard and, dragging the tiny shard of glass from a seat beside him in his wake, slipped through the rear window. Seeing it neatly, "Stay low," Lister injected quite unnecessarily. The hillbilly scampered up the hillock and out of Wimmer's sight as the truck swept round a bend, naturally giving Lister's inexcusable insistence on obeying the perverse conventions of his world. The bend would take them round the hillock where the hermit will be waiting for them, giving them a chance to squeeze off another shot. Sure enough, there was a strange implosion sound again, and the glass on Lister's lap leaped up and vomited itself into the driver's door window, which for some reason appeared to be misted, either and coated in yellowish slime. Then Lister did something for which Wimmer would never forgive him. Lister parked the car. "Lister, what a smeg are you playing at?" Wimmer Mexo Espronode. Lister ignored him, but forward and began fiddling with the steering column. Wimmer looked up and saw the hermit's face pressed madly against the driver's window, yelling incomprehensible threats. And Lister stopped the engine. Without taking his eyes from a yellow slobber the mountain man was slithering up from the window, Wimmer asked, in a voice far too calm to be saying, "What are you doing, David?" "What do you think? I'm trying to unhotwire this damn thing." Wimmer tried to swallow, but his tongue just rasped against his sandpaper palate. A more prudent approach one might venture would be to leave this vehicle in a post-hastily kind of way and run backwards the hell out of here. Lister carried on fiddling with the ignition wires. Wimmer have got to undo this. That's the way things are around here. Effect and course. Every effect is followed by a course. There's no way round it. We couldn't just brave the rules for once. Not rules, Wimmer. Laws. Immutable, cosmic laws. Look, man, just stop interrupting me and try and panic in silence, okay? The engine churned and spluttered and stopped. The hillbilly stopped thumping, cussing and slubbering and moved away. Wimmer peered over the edge of his window and watched the hermit clenching his shotgun, racing badly backwards towards the a pathetic log cabin. Rimmer could quite clearly see the giant sow sitting in the swing chair on the wooden porch. The hermit appeared to have dressed the pig in pink gingham dress and varnished its hooves with bright red nail polish. Rimmer really didn't want to know why. The engine turned again and died. Rimmer found his soul a new level of loathing for Lister. Fervently, selflessly, he'd risk life and limb to land on this hellhole to rescue his shipmate. And how had a scumbag repaid him, but leading them into the series of life-threatening situations, culminating in his being unshot at and disslumbered over by the giant pig's husband, who was almost certainly related himself in a variety of illegal ways. The engine shuddered one last time, and Lister seemed satisfied. "That's it," he said. "We're out of here." Then leaned over and thrust open Rimmer's door. Rimmer glanced over at the cabin. The hillbilly had stashed his shotgun by the door and was hurrying off backwards up towards some thick woods behind them. "Come on," Lister was yelling. "Move it." Kryten jumped out of the car and slammed his door. Lister leaned over to the passenger's side and locked it. Rimmer eased himself out of the jalopy, keeping his eyes fixed on the sow, who was rocking happily back and forth on the porch bench, its little pig eyes watching him. Kryten leaned in the car and helped the cat crawl out backwards. He closed the door, and Lister leaned over and locked that too. Lister jumped out of the driver's seat and started poking at the door lock with a rusty nail that had leaped into his hand from a track. "What now?" Rimmer whined. "Reckon you must keep it locked." Rimmer looked over at the woods the hillbilly had vanished into. Why on low would a trigger-happy poker brother locking his car up here in this godforsaken wilderness? "Search me." Lister heard the click as the lock connected. "Maybe he doesn't want the pig driving off in it." That made sense to Rimmer. From what he had seen of the mountain man, the pig was undoubtedly the brains of business. Lister wiggled the nail out of the lock and placed it in the dirt beside the car. He straightened. "All right, it's leg it time." Rimmer asked, "Which way?" Even though he was fairly sure he could guess the answer, Lister nodded towards the woods. I reckon he was chasing us, don't you?" He turned to Kryten. "Who was conversing in forward speak with a Kurt? How was he?" He'd be fine, sir. So long as he stayed together. Apparently, he had an unpleasant experience in some bushes a while back when we left him alone." Lister wiped the palm of his hand across the face. I can guess. We should have warned him. He looked at the cat, answering his accusatory stare with a sympathetic facial shrug, and they nodded again at the words. Okay, people, wagons roll. He performed his familiar reverse skid and took off the trays. Kryten turned around and followed him backwards. Rimmer and the cat looked at each other and mutually voted to convention. They ran towards the woods forwards. As the cat leaped into the woods, the thick undergrowth snapped aside before him, clearing his path, then slashed back off his calves behind him. Rimmer's hologrammatic feet simply disappeared into the heavy fern as if he were running on the foot-thick soft carpet. The undawning sun burst sporadically through the overhanging leaves, illuminating their flight with 1,000 golden spotlights. They thrust on the words, kept yelling, Manad, as his faint-footed slipstream continually ripped his pigtail, his cheeks and eyes. He reached behind his head and grabbed it, keeping his other arm needlessly cocked in front of him to protect his face from branches which had absolutely no faith would continue to yield a path for him. Just before he reached them, the cat burst through the thick bush to find Lister and Kryten crouched behind the bark of fern, which looked up onto the hillside. Rimmer's heart jumped up and shocked with his Adam's apple when he recognized it as a cave they had concealed Starbuck in. The broad, twisted grin of delight slowly trickled back down from his cheeks when he saw that the Lister was frowning and chewing it inside of his lips. What's up? He whispered. We're home. Not quite, Lister hissed. Rimmer followed his gaze. In the clearing before them, a bizarre, jerry-built concussion of fate, tubes and pipes was sucking in smoke from a tree line above. What is it? Kryten answered. I would guess some kind of illegal steal. Not for the first time, Rimmer doubted the sanity of the lawmakers of reverse Earth. What in heaven's name could possibly be illegal about taking dangerous alcoholic liquor and converting into the grain for planting? Then he just saw it. Just below, a small blue flame, which was sucking the heat out of some bubbling liquid in a fat. The rubber tube led to the fuel canister. The canister was imprinted with Jupiter Mine Corporation logo and stamped Red Dwarf. This time, Rimmer's heart plunged towards the pit of his stomach. His testicles leaped to meet it. The hillbilly had found Starbuck. It was just as they left it. Fighting an urge to run, Kryten walked up to the airlock door and keyed in the access code. A red scanner light slid across his face, and the airlock door wheel side open. He walked into the midsection and straight up the four steps into the cockpit section as the drive lights flickered on. He eased himself down into the seat of the drive computer station and started running the system checks. The cat headed straight up the stairs, which led from a midsection to west quarters above, presumably to check that no one had been screwing around with his clothes, while Rimmer made for the maintenance corridor to glance all around the engine rooms and investigate the supplies. Lister could do was sit. Thus fumbled down into one of the chairs surrounding the scanner table and looked around the room. Above the grinder grid of the mid-section ceiling, the lights appeared to flare. Lister put his hand to his eyes and came away wet. He looked down at the floor, where small droplets began to form from a damp patch there and started whipping up towards his face. Shamelessly, Lister unwrapped. 36 years ago, in his own universe, Lister had died. His shipmates had brought him to this place, where the time's reversal could bring him back to life. And he'd lived that life, and that had been grateful for it. But all the while, he felt he was an outsider here. There he had been joys, of course. Somehow, his long-dead ex-lover, Chrissy Kuchowski, had been brought here with him, and they had shared a pleasure of growing younger together. Eventually, their twin sons had come home to live with them, and they had been a further delight of watching them demature. But all that had long since passed. More than a decade had gone by since the boys had been pushed back into their mother, and 9 years ago, he and Chrissy had been introduced, whereupon she had promptly gone away and forgotten him. And after that, the only thing that had kept him sane had been the dream of this moment. Here now, sitting in the Starbucks, familiar and homely, metallic surroundings. For Lister, there was no glorious decor in the history of interior design. The loss of a teardrop rolled up his eyes, leaving only fading red rims round his eyes as the cat skipped down the metal stairway, grinning as if there was the wedge of Adam lodged between his cheeks. Fires were stoots. He blamed. Shakawa? Knack? Ew. Rimmer ducked in through a hatch from the engine room. What was that? Lister looked up. He hadn't used forward speak for decades. but he ought to start practicing. He ran the cat's words over in his head. Certainly, they clicked. I think he said, "We can relax. Buy suit our save." Excellent news. Rimmer favoured the cat with a grin. He refers for idiots and foreigners. I, for one, shall sleep soundly tonight. Well, he rubbed his hands together. Supplies are good. Just one fuel canister missing. Engines seem operational. Computers are functioning. Looks like we can lift off. Kryten stepped down from a cockpit. The others turned their eyes towards him expectantly. I, he began, and then slammed his forehead against the hull's interior. I'm afraid there is one minor problem. Somehow the landing jets have become detached. There was a brief moment of silence, and then Lister suddenly cursed "Smeg!" and kicked the body of a scanner table, neatly removing the dent that had been there. It's not that bad, people. Rimmer smiled. Encouragement. We don't have to land. Once we RF with Red Dwarf, one of us can jetpack over and tow Starbuck in. Yes. You don't understand. Kryten sank into the seat opposite Lister. When we sat down here, I had to reverse the controls. The only way of bringing us down was to use the takeoff procedures. Rimmer was still bothered. So Lister said, we need a landing jets to take off. Without them, we'll be stuck here. He looked between his feet where the damp patch had been. We'll be stuck here forever. Four of them stood under the belch of Starbuck's belly. Kryten's light angled directly at the alarming space where retro packs jets ought to have been. All three of them were missing. It doesn't make sense. Rimmer ran his hand through his woolly hair. Why would Jeffrey Crumpet's stupider brother went there? Landing jets were from a space vehicle. What's he going to do? Launch his cabin into orbit and join Mile High Club was with his pig. Perhaps he's not the one responsible. Kryten offered. Look. He directed the beam at the several retainers which had been welded to the engine. The metal exposed there was rusted over. Kryten's list of things he didn't want to think about was growing into noveler proportions. All right, Rimmer, all right. Rimmer walked back to Starbuck's rear. Couldn't we rig it one of the main thrusters underneath? So could it act as a landing jet? It might work, Kryten agreed. If we had time. Unfortunately, there's no option. Why? Rimmer strode back to the group. What's the rush? We are relying on certain planetary conditions to help us slam shot out of our solar system. Those conditions will not be fulfilled unless we leave soon. How soon is soon? 5.5 hours. Listed below, blue, like there was a tuber missing from his lips. That soon. Okay, alright. How about we angle the front retros? That should give us some lift. Kryten looked towards the cave's entrance. I doubt we'd get sufficient power to clear up the tops of those redwoods. Certainly not enough to get us out of the mount to get us over that mountain. Right then, Lister shrugged. We've got just one shot. Find those engines. How long would it take us to touch them? Kryten looked at the ground and shook his head. There was no way of knowing. It would depend on what condition they're in. At least 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. Lister looked at his watch. That gives us till 2 a.m. 1:30 at the pinch. We are going to have to split into 2 groups. I'm not good in the dark. Whether it's swimmer, it's best go with the cats. Come what may. We meet back here at 1:30. Kryten nodded, and they headed out of the cave. When they reached the clearing, where the still was bubbling away, Lister and the cat peeled off the south towards the mountain man's cabin, and Kryten and Rimmer carried on eastwards into the woods. Kryten's plan was to walk for 15 minutes searching for every square inch of the terrarium, then cut back diagonally southwest for another 50, then north for 15 minutes more. It wasn't exactly a definitive search pattern, but it would leave him a full hour of his backup plan, which involved racing around in a panicky fog if nothing turned up, hoping against hope to come across the engines by sheer luck. Lister and the cat crept up to the log cabin. The lights were out, and the metal pipe served as a chimney was no longer sucking thick, white smoke from the sky. They led edged along the office of the cabin up to the shattered window. From inside they had came the regular hum of a deep sleep snore. Good, the hermit was asleep. That would make it easier to search the storage sheds. The cat purred gingerly over the wooden sill and through the crack between the sleds. The entire cabin was comprised of a single room. There were no jet engines in sight. In fact, there was a very little furniture, a rocking chair, and a rickety wooden table with a short-wave radio on top. Most of the room was taken up by the huge bed, which could have happily accommodated 6 or 7 normal-sized people. As it was, a single occupant was taking up the bulk of it. The giant hog. She was snoring contentedly, one hoof on the pillow beside her head. She was wearing a floral head nightdress and a lace-trimmed cap. Suddenly, there was a loud reverse cough from a direction of the porch. The cat froze. Lister crawled towards the front of the house and peeked over the porch. The hermit was sitting on a swing chair. He raised an almost empty bottle to his lips and half filled it from his mouth. Lister caught a wincing smell of a pungent fumes. Neat hutch. The hillbilly got to his feet, looked around, scanning the woods. He started pacing agitatedly up and down the creaking porch boards. Lister backed away. What the smeg was the man doing, awake and getting on drunk at this hour? Who was he expecting to see? Then, had he just got out of bed, or was he going to be waiting on the porch all night? Lister checked his watch and blinked a curse. There were 6 or 7 wooden shacks scattered around the property, as well as the fair-sized barn, having to keep to the shadows. And a creep around silently would slow down the search considerably. It was unlikely they had able to cover the whole place before I have to set off back to the bug. He sighed, stood and nodded for the cat to follow him to the nearest of the shacks. Kryten was on the last leg of his search pattern and less than 10 minutes away from engaging panic like a headless chicken mode when he found a first of the engines. He wouldn't have spotted it at all if he hadn't actually tripped up over it. It was buried in the soil less than 50 yards from an illegal still, with just a few inches of a nose cone peeking above the ground. Kryten knelt down and clawed away the surface soil frantically, while Rimmer kept timid lookout, trying not to think of the strange night creatures that might be lurking in the damp, dark shadows of the trees. Kryten exposed a further foot or so of the engine. The excitement of the discovery drowned with each inch. The engine was rusted to hell. There was extremely doubtful it could ever be restored to working condition. He lurched upright and sighed. Well, Rimmer's eyebrows crooked with expectation. It's no good, sir. It's buried too deep. With some kind of excavation tool, we haven't got the hope of extracting it in time. Kryten discreetly slipped his hand behind his back and discarded a shard of rusted metal they had found flaked off the engine. Rimmer knelt by the exposed housing. Thankfully, there was too little light for him to spot the true decrepitude of the engine's condition. This is insane. Why would that backwards bastard bury it? Kryten shook his head. Had a good idea what happened, but it belonged at the very top of the things he didn't want to think about the list. We need some kind of digging tool. I'll get one from Starburg. Suggest you stay here. He turned and prepared to switch up to maximum jog mode. Woo, woo, woo. Rimmer smiled. Are you insane? I'll come with you. I'll make you much better time on my own. Rimmer peered into the relentless gloom of the surrounding woods. He thought of mountain lions and grizzly bears. He thought of wolf packs and cougars. He thought of werewolves, Sasquatch, and inbred hillbillies with guns and seriously dubious sexual preference. He thought of all the wild things with the yellow eyes and the irresistible bloodlust that would swallow his light bee whole as defense cannot pay, without even making a gulping noise. We'll go together, he said. Very well, Kryten nodded. Then turned lurch and pulled Arthur at maximum acceleration, leaving Rimmer wide-eyed, alone and furious. Kryten didn't get very far. As he buzzed through the thicket into the clearing that housed the still, his peripheral vision registered a pickaxe handle and stopped. He underestimated his speed and stopped too quickly, losing his balance, tumbling to the ground. He put out his hands to break his fall, plunging them to the wooden bucket filled with rainwater. When he pulled them out, he was alarmed to find they were covered in some kind of sticky goo. He considered trying to wash them, then realized that wouldn't work. In this universe, you use water to get yourself dirty. He picked himself up and waddled over to the pickaxe handle. It was protruding from a clump of bushes. He grabbed it with the sticky hands and he readied himself to tug it free. He looked down and froze. Lying in the bushes beneath him was the lifeless body of a hermit. The pickaxe was buried deep in his chest. Okay, let's stop on page 57, chapter 10, section 10. Okay, I hope you enjoy this video, Milado. I hope you like this. I hope you enjoy this video when I read this Red Dwarf backwards novel version. Was written by original co-creator Bob Grant. So feel free to write in comments down below and give thumbs up. Next time I will go to continue reading Red Dwarf backwards on chapter 10 through page 57. Okay, I'll see you soon, and smoke me a kipper. I'll be back for breakfast. I'll see you smackheads later, and remember, don't forget to subscribe to my channel to hit this bell notification. Don't miss out the future video. That's really important. Okay, I hope you see you smackheads later, and I'll see you on the next 4th part. And thank you very much.